is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 242. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at PegasusPodcast@gmail.com. We're back from the bye week. Christian, did you enjoy your bye week?
I did enjoy my bye week. It was incredibly fruitful to not have to watch UCF play a football game. I forgot, and I guess I'll have to get used to it since the offseason is almost upon us. We do podcasts so often in season, it feels like we have not done one of these in 19 years because I'm used to doing one on Saturday, and it's been not even a full week, but it's been a long time.
I had the same thought because I was thinking, I think last week we did it on Wednesday, didn't we?
Yep. We did.
So it hasn't even been a week. So during the offseason, that would be like not abnormal. But because we didn't do on Saturday, it feels like it's been a while. But yeah, no, it was nice to not have to watch UCF play. It's unfortunate that we have to watch them play on Saturday coming up and next Friday.
If you're watching the YouTube version, you may have just noticed I switched our screen so that our names are or our faces are under the correct names. And a little behind the scenes on the Pegasus Podcast, since we switched to StreamYard, not the name of this, I apologize. Since we switched to StreamYard, I guess, am I the buttons guy in this setup? Is that how that works? I press the buttons, and one task that Bailey does for me is every single week we record it auto loads our images in the wrong place. Bailey's face is under my name and my face is under his name and Bailey. And I have never once on my own noticed.
No, you did last time.
Did I really?
You did last time. And I think that's why I didn't remind you this time is because I don't know. When I first got on, I was like, maybe I'll tell him before we started recording. And then more behind the scenes, we just talked for like 25 minutes before we started recording. So other things came to mind that made me forget to remind you. So
I don't ever want anyone to doubt the reality of our friendship because we have to talk for an hour to do this podcast, and for some reason decided to pre-talk for 30 minutes before doing the actual podcast, which that was partially me for us getting on and me saying, can I change several things about the outline right before we start? But we're here, we're ready.
Also, wouldn't be surprised if we talked for 30 more minutes after the podcast is over. And
there you go.
We will have been on StreamYard from like 5 o'clock until 7.
Subscribe to Pegasus Podcast Plus to hear our off-the-record conversations we have after we're done recording about what we're going to do for dinner and what's going on in our general life.
No. All right. So before we get to our UCF West Virginia preview, which is the game on Saturday, we're going to talk. We're kind of calling it audible here. You called this audible. And I just agreed. There's some weird buzz going around now nationally about a potential Gus Malzahn retirement, which is something you and I have talked about. And we've kind of talked about how we hope they can find a way to kind of maybe nudge him toward that retirement. But it's notable that this is being pitched as a possibility by several outlets, or at least a couple outlets nationally, because no one talks about UCF normally. And this being out there seems to mean something.
You say nudge, I say shove off a cliff towards retirement, but yeah, all the same. Yeah, so obviously we in our circles have been talking about, and you've heard it on this podcast, about the idea that UCF probably cannot afford to move on from Gus financially. I don't believe, I could be wrong. You never know if as JP calls them, if the BOGO boosters get their stuff together or whatever. I don't believe that there's a reality you're ever going to see where a headline pops up that UCF has fired Gus Malzahn, especially not if they make a bowl, because I think UCF would be a little bit of a laughing stock at that point because if they fired a coach for making a bowl. But either way, what we've said repeatedly is that the most likely outcome, if Gus were to leave, I still think the most likely outcome is he's the coach next year, would be that he retires. They find some number in the middle. Obviously, he isn't going to walk away for nothing, but some number less than the buyout, which is believed to be in the $12 million range. So we've been talking about that because this is a UCF podcast. I don't know if you've noticed if you're a UCF fan, but since UCF stopped winning football games, they haven't really been talked about nationally. People don't really notice them, and that's fair because they haven't done anything of note for quite some time. But starting last week, some stuff started trickling. It started with Brandon Marcello over at 247, but also CBS, because CBS owns 247, so he writes at both places. They published like a coaching hot seat, coaching update article, and he casually sort of threw in a reference to, well, Gus is up there, maybe he could retire. And that was notable for a couple reasons. The first being that, again, that's not something that if you're not in hearing things from UCF or in the UCF community, that's not an idea you would come up with on your own. Like random Texas Tech fans aren't like, wonder if Gus should retire. Like that was a weird thing since it's something we're talking about to get to the national level. The other interesting twist there is Brandon Marcello. I believe he was the Auburn 247 reporter before he went national. And It's always seemed like he has some in with Gus. It's everything Malzahn related is usually broken by him, and that carried on to UCF. Like this guy who has no connections to UCF randomly started breaking UCF news during the Gus era. So
was he also the one who got to like come and follow them for the whole trip to Boise State last year?
Yes, Gus Malzahn, who
yeah.
runs this program like it is the Pentagon, gave Brandon Marcello last year unfettered access for an entire week. He shadowed the program for an entire week. He was in the meeting rooms and reported an incredibly in-depth
article.
Piece. It was a really good article, but
that again, also revealed to everyone that Gus does read the tweets.
Yes, the article included Gus scrolling his mentions, reading the tweets. So don't take that as encouragement to tweet bad things. Please stop doing that. That was not what I meant to do there, but that's so again, he's always had more access to Gus and by extension UCF than the average reporter. So interesting, he would put that out there. Then earlier this week, Football Scoop, which is not like ESPN, but typically do have sources are in the know. They posted an article about what they're hearing on the coaching carousel, and it's the usual stuff. There have been, as we talked about in our previous podcast, it's going to be a slow cycle for the P4. There's still no P4 openings at this stage in time. There are a bunch of G5 openings now. They're all firing coaches and whatever, but they at Football Scoop randomly include a line, quote, "Additionally, it's worth monitoring things at Central Florida, where a 3-0 beginning is now a 4-6 reality with a road game at West Virginia and a home finale against Utah. Malzahn, 59, is well positioned to retire if he chooses to do so." Again, a weird thing to just come up. And we're not even done, because then the kicker is today, CBS publishes a big article on Deion Sanders. And I bet you're thinking the only way UCF's going to come up in a Deion Sanders article is to talk about how he destroyed them on their home field. But no, there's a very, very interesting line in a section where it's talking about where Deion might go next if he leaves Colorado. And randomly, he talks about the state of Florida and then says, quote, "If Gus Malzahn were to retire, fellow Big 12 school UCF would be an intriguing fit, especially as it's centrally located in Florida. Sanders has said that he's responsible for their biggest ever recruiting weekend when the Buffs played the Knights this fall." So
I didn't like that line.
Listeners, just put a pin in the whole Deion coming to UCF thing for a second. We'll get to that in a second, because I think that's probably nonsense. But we're now up to 3 places. And do you want to know who one of the 3 authors listed on that Deion feature was?
Yes.
Brandon Marcello.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Put your tinfoil hats on with me and think this is interesting, because I find this intriguing for sure.
I don't think the tinfoil hats are necessary in this scenario, because why else? Like, why else is this being mentioned in 3 different places by at least 2 different sources in the last week?
One of the sources who is known to be very close to Gus.
Yes.
And it's a weird thing he would be putting out without checking with Gus if that was something on the table.
Yeah. Oh, man, it's dumb. It's very dumb, because we spend all off season, all, winter, spring, summer, being like, wow, can't wait for football. Can't wait till the season gets here. I can't wait for these next 2 games to be over just so we can see what's going to happen.
I'm ready for resolution. Like, I'm just
I want to know
whether it's Gus still here next year or not. I'm just ready for resolution. This is a weird, and honestly, you might be in the camp where you say we have resolution. He's not leaving. This has all just been fan wants more than reality. And I'm not going to tell you you're wrong there, because like I said, the financial, it's always going to have to be a Gus call. UCF can't do this now. And I'm not saying this is what's happened. I haven't heard this. Like, I want to be very clear about that. But just as an example, say that Mahadra has made it clear that the administration is not behind Gus. The boosters are not behind Gus. The money isn't there. Recruiting's falling apart. I mean, you can't fire him. But at that point, does Gus really stubbornly say, well, I'm not leaving until you cut a check? Or is he like, all right, this isn't working. I don't want my legacy to just be further tarnished as this goes off the rails. Maybe we work out a deal, maybe something like that. But it's going to have to be a Gus decision. But this is the idea of things aren't going well at UCF. So maybe Gus Malzahn decides to quote unquote retire now is a very unique thing for people who are not paying attention to UCF to just kind of like think up. It implies there's something out there to some degree. And I find that very interesting.
And what's especially interesting is we talked about this, I think, a little bit last week, was the fact that there aren't a lot of big jobs open. You just mentioned that a few minutes ago. It's like there aren't a lot of big jobs open. So, and I don't even look at this as like, oh, well, they got to talk about something since none of the big jobs are open. I think it's more so, it's even more notable where it's like this could be one of the bigger jobs opening, which, I mean, it's like it's the biggest job ever, but it's one that we talked about last week is an attractive one for a lot of reasons. And if it opens, it's going to be one of the more attractive ones out there just by default, because there aren't going to be a ton of Power 4 openings. So with this being floated out there.
Where's the Power 4 opening right now? Where is it?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Because, I mean, so we talked last week and Billy Napier is still going to be at Florida. They've come out and said that. Since last week, Dave Aranda has been kind of confirmed as, I don't know, that's how you say it, but he's going to be back next year for Baylor. Is there another one that I'm missing? I think there might be. But nonetheless, there are a ton of these jobs that you thought might come open that all of a sudden, no, they're actually
Arkansas. Sam Pittman was the other one a lot of people thought might open, and there were reports this week that it's heavily trending towards him keeping his job. So it's like I said, it's a weird year. It's because of the House settlement. Terry Mahadra just sent an email to fans this week about the House settlement and how important it's going to be. Like, this isn't the new norm. It's just schools are afraid to spend right now. But I mean, the most attractive job that is open in the country right now is either FAU or East Carolina, depending on which way you go on that. And there aren't like, now I'm not sitting here to say there are going to be 0 Power 4 openings. I'm sure something's going to happen somewhere. Maybe Maryland drops a couple more and they move on there. I mean, I don't know, it will happen somewhere, but I don't think it's going to be more than like 3-ish teams. And honestly, crazy. It's probably not going to be programs like UCF that, at least on paper, have a significant amount of upside. So if UCF can get an opening in a way where they haven't just paid Gus $1 gazillion, don't have money to hire a new coach, they could be in this, take advantage of this very weird 1-year blip where no one wants to fire coaches and they suddenly have their picking of the pool. And that is why there have been all these G5 firings. I was reading about that this week, is that they see this as a rare opportunity where if you're a G5 that is at least perceived as somewhat valuable or could be valuable, like FAU or East Carolina, they feel like they need to pull the trigger now because they want to take advantage of this cycle when there are no major openings. It's like that. It's the opportunity is here. And maybe more P4 jobs open because maybe other P4 schools we're not even talking about are thinking the same thing we are of, hey, maybe we need to get our guy out now, but I don't know who it would be. Most of the P4 teams that were bad this year are teams that were expecting to be bad. There haven't been any like shocking surprises except FSU. And Mike Norvell's buyout is like, it's just not mathematically doable. So I just, and I
same with Brian Kelly.
Yeah, it's well, Brian, I don't know, whatever. I don't know if that's fireable yet. We'll see. But yeah, either way, it's not really happening anywhere, which is scary.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm again, like, I feel like I'm being not held hostage by Gus Malzahn, but kind of held hostage by this situation where it's like, I want these next 2 weeks to be over so that I know what's going to happen and mentally prepare myself for that, because there will be a great deal of mental preparation if he does say, yeah, I'm coming back next year. I will take probably several weeks to sit there and just probably stare at a wall and be like, all right, I gotta get back and center myself here. But I don't know. It's just like we're in wait and see mode, and it's so weird to be in wait and see mode when there's still 2 games left.
It's all weird because I also understand that, at least on the surface, like we've talked about at length why I feel a coaching change is necessary regardless of what happens in these last 2 games. Javon Boggs has taken a visit to Michigan, guys. Like, it's over. The class is dead. The boosters are mad. There's not more money coming in. Like, there's not a lot of optimism to hold on for future years. But I also understand from an outside perspective, if you're not in the UCF space, say UCF wins out and they go 6-6, that would be a wonky headline that people would be shocked by if it was like UCF just fired their coach for going 6-6 in year 2 in the Power 4. Like, they would be made fun of for that. It would shrink the talent pool of some coaches being like, Jesus, I'm not going there. Like, they don't even know what they are. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. So I understand while we on the inside, like in this community, get why it has to happen. I get that they can't reasonably do that anyway, but retirement works. You spin it both ways. And honestly, I think it's even easier for Gus if they win.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah. I was just going to say it almost leads perfectly into our game preview for West Virginia because I think I texted you earlier this week and we were talking about it and said, if they do somehow find a way to beat West Virginia and beat Utah and get to a bowl, does Gus then say, I took this program to back-to-back bowl win, or not bowl wins, probably going to lose the bowl game because it's Gus. Back-to-back bowl games in their first 2 years in the Big 12. My work here is done. I'll retire. I'll hang it up, and that's it. I do wonder about that. I still wonder. I know everybody like talks about his age, but he seems like a guy who would probably, if he could and would have success with it, would coach until he's 85 years old. But
the one thing I'll say against that is when he came into UCF, he was pretty open with recruits. I don't know if he ever said it like publicly, but he had a timeline when he came in. He was not planning to be here for 20 years. But yeah, I just think that and I could be wrong because there's also the elements of they went out and they somehow miraculously make a bowl despite all odds. And he's like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, maybe I figured something out and then we have to do this again next year. But there's two tracks here to retirement, right? There's say they lose one of these and they finish 5-7 and they lose both and finish 4-8. And then you see the headline, Gus Malzahn is retiring. It's like, wink, wink. I think most people are probably going to think, is he retiring or is it? And it'll be about, wow, yeah, that just didn't really work there. It's so funny how single game swing things, but say that they make the bowl. They beat West Virginia, they beat Utah. He announces at that point that he's retiring. I'd assume he'd stay on and coach the bowl game. No one's going to view that as he's been fired. You'll get a month of ESPN articles about, oh, Gus Malzahn, former Auburn coach, did all this stuff, hanging it up. What does it mean for NIL or all that crap? And it's like, it gets to be a little more of a celebration, even if it didn't work super well here. And it's an easy pitch of, I showed them how to recruit. I showed them how to build to this level. I transitioned them in with making a bowl in both of their first 2 seasons, something none of the other newcomers have done. I'm done here. I'm ready to hand it off. Like, that works a lot better as a legacy, even though we're talking about a literal 1-game swing.
It is so weird too, because like I try to do some quick math here, and if I did it wrong, then I'm just dumb. But if they find a way to win these last 2 games, which I'm hating myself for this, but I'm kind of thinking they might do it.
It feels doable.
It feels oddly more doable than I thought it would.
Yeah, but also I thought it was doable for Christian Peterson to catch a ball in the end zone. So like, you never know what's going to happen, but it does feel doable on paper.
Yeah, but say they do, then they're 6-6. He would be 30-22 in his time at UCF over 4 seasons, and factor in the bowl game, maybe 31-22, maybe 30-23. It's not great, but I don't know. Like, I don't think there is really any path to making that record look drastically better by the time another year is over, or another 2 years that UCF is done. Like, I think it just kind of his success level at this program is kind of just where it is right now. Like, I don't think it's going to get much better. It could get even worse. If he comes back next year and they go 4-8, he's going to probably end up with a losing record. I didn't do the math on that, but.
And the big difference with next year is they're about to bring in a pretty bad class. What's just turning into a straight up bad class at this point is guys keep jumping ship. From how the boosters talk on Twitter, just from what's kind of out there, I don't think they're going to have anywhere near the NIL capabilities they had last offseason. So there isn't a winning recipe. Like, I think that if I'm Gus, that's the biggest thing pushing me to retirement, is not just whether I think it's fair or not, or whether I think it's time, just how do I pitch to myself that this is going to get better next year? And it's not, and the schedule's hard next year. They have 5 Big 12 road games next year. They play North Carolina at home. It's next year's going to be tough. And it's going to be a rebuild either way, whether Gus is the coach or not. Right. A lot easier to sell a rebuild to your fans and your boosters when it's with a new coach.
Not only that, but like it's hard work. Like he to sell it to himself. It's like, do I want to go through another year of all this stress and all of this hard work, or do I just call it quits and go spend time with my family? And he could easily, I think, like, as funny as it sounds, I think it was, I forget who it was. It might have been Adam or Trace on Suns. Maybe it was Suns Live the other day. Maybe it was Suns Today. I don't know. Maybe it was Brian. They were talking about how before he came to UCF, he had like these offers to do TV. And it's like, you think about Gus Malzahn's personality on TV and you're like, But I think I still think he could probably do it. I think like if he wants to, he could go spend time with his family and still stay connected to football one way or the other. Maybe he ends up on Big Noon because they don't really seem to have any openings on game day. Maybe they bring in Gus Malzahn to Big Noon. I don't know. But
I don't know. Saban and Malzahn on game day together would be kind of fun. And for the record, we didn't think Saban had a personality, and he's been fantastic on game day. So
Saban's been fan. Yeah, he has.
The other thing is Gus can retire, and if he doesn't like it in 2 years, he can go get another job.
Yeah.
Like any G5 pro, if Gus retired right now and took 2 years off, like any G5 team with an opening would be like, oh, hell yeah, we want Gus Malzahn as our head coach. Like that's an option too. So it's not like that has to be the end of the journey or whatever, but it just does feel like it's kind of the end of the journey here. And I can't wait for these clips to be thrown back at me when they win these last 2. They go to and win the bowl. And since they've won 3 in a row, everyone's like, things are fixed. And then we have to do a whole off season of talking about how things are fixed and then wait for them to start losing games again next year. It's going to be a hoot, but yeah. Well, first in the middle, they'll get all these transfers and we'll do podcasts on how all the transfers are great program saving transfers. And then he'll penny boom them and they won't play. So
I'm going to say this on the podcast to you. I was going to bring it up to you next time we talked about it, but I don't want to do any podcasts on transfers this offseason. I really don't.
Well, it's tough as a podcaster because I feel like we have personally been burned, and it's frustrating because the portal era is young. This has only been a thing for like 3 years, so we've all, from fans to coaches to podcasters, we've all had to kind of like learn in real time how to handle this, And I also don't want to give the impression this class didn't suck. Like KJ was the big miss. It's like there were like Deshaun Pace has been great. X-Ray Alexander has been great. Like there are a lot of pieces they brought in that worked. It's just I don't know how to discern who's going to be good and who's not. I think it's become clear. And if the coaches can't, I sure can. So I think it's just become clear that it's hard to figure out how to manage that because you want to talk about the upside, but it's hard to not, I don't know. It's like they don't bring in anyone from the portal who you're like, they suck. Like, it's like there's always a reason they brought them in. So it's just, I don't know.
And I've made it clear how hard it is to figure out who's going to be good or not, because when we do the transfer drafts, it just happens. And I'm like, I thought I had a good class. And then I look back in week 5 and I'm like, oh, that was stupid. And, I took KJ's passing with my number 1 overall pick. And then I think it took Penny Boone with number 2. And they just decided we don't want to give Penny Boone any carries.
Do you want our picks real quickly?
Not really, but go ahead.
Our transfer draft. Bailey took.
I picked the wrong receiver.
Bailey took KJ Jefferson's passing stats, Penny Boone, Javarius Johnson, and Brian Threats. I forgot about Brian Threats. Completely forgot.
So did
he was a guy on the team.
Yeah.
I took KJ's rushing stats, Ladarius Tennyson, Ethan Barr, and Nigel E. Kelly. I did okay, actually. That's not terrible.
You did all right. KJ's rushing was a wash. Ethan Barr is not great, but the other 2 were serviceable and good.
Thank God we didn't take Antoine Jackson.
I'll call that a win for myself. Is not doing that. Yeah, Deshaun Pace not getting drafted ended up being like the big. A week later we were like, how did no one draft Deshaun Pace?
I swear to God, we finished the episode and afterwards we're like, we probably should have drafted Pace. I don't know what happened. It just didn't work out that way.
Yeah. No, I hate. We talked leading up to that podcast about how much I hate the transfer draft. My hate for it has only grown. So
we don't. It's our podcast. We don't have to do it.
That's to say, we don't have to do it. I'm making a pitch to you live on the podcast right now. I don't want to do it anymore. But if we have to do it, I'll just complain the whole time.
All right. Let us know if you're listening to this on the YouTube comments, Twitter, wherever. Do you like the transfer drafts?
If you do, you're a sicko. If you do, you're maybe a bad person.
If not, we're gonna stop.
Yeah. No, that's a sicko move. If you like listening to us talk about transfers who are on largely, we're going to draft 8 of them. 6 of them probably are going to be bad.
Yes.
That's just going to happen every year, apparently.
Guys, KJ Jefferson is currently the 4th string quarterback. I don't know how are we supposed to predict any of this when a guy throws for 8,000 yards in the SEC and then ends the season as the 4th string quarterback and it's not injury related? What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to possibly say about any of these transfers?
It's not worth it. I had something else to say, but I don't remember what it was, and we don't need to kind of extend this any further.
Yes, we do. Really quickly. It's going to be 5 seconds. I know we skipped over the Deion Sanders to UCF part. It's because that's not real.
Right.
That's not real. So, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was. I was going to bring up an entirely different point, but it was probably going to extend this by another 5 minutes. So let's just jump to the West Virginia preview and talk about this game coming up on Saturday. West Virginia comes in at 5-5, 4-3 in the Big 12. This game, since the last time we talked, has gotten a kickoff time and a television network, 3:30 on ESPNU.
Woohoo!
So that's where we are.
It's about as nasty as it gets, guys.
Yeah, that's where we are. I think I've said it on the podcast. If I haven't, I've said it to you. I was hoping for a noon game. We've now made it throughout the entire season without a noon game. And with the way the season's gone, every Saturday UCF's played, I've just been like, I wish we could get this over with in the early window. And they don't want to let it happen. So that's what's happening. But 3:30 on ESPNU. As far as what's at stake for UCF, especially just trying to keep bowl eligibility alive and set up actual stakes for the Black Friday game against Utah, because if they lose this game and they're 4-7 going into that game, what does it even matter at that point?
Okay, here's a game. I should have prepared this. When was the last? Because this does feel foreign, like a do or die do or die game to get to a bowl, and it's not the final game of the season.
Oh,
when was the last time that happened? 2015, it was 2 games in. We knew they weren't going to a bowl, so there was no suspense there. 2016, they clinched pretty early. I think they were 6-4 at one point.
Yeah, they were.
14, 13, 12, 11. 2011? Is that the last time?
Maybe.
The year where they couldn't pick between Godfrey and Bortles, and it was a whole thing?
Maybe. I don't know.
There you go. So this is uncharted territory. That 2011 was basically a different millennia. So this is, or 2011 was basically different millennia. So this is a weird era to be in, where UCF has to win all their games from here to make it to a bowl.
So what were they last year? Where they were 5-5, right? Going into those last 2 games, and they lost to Texas Tech and then beat Houston.
And it was just weird because we weren't really nervous, because it was like we kind of figured they'd lose to Texas Tech and beat Houston because Houston was pretty terrible. And UCF hadn't been good, but UCF was, they were beating the teams that they were better than. Mm-hmm. So, and once they got, we didn't think they were going to make a bowl until they beat Oklahoma State, and then the math worked out. So,
yeah.
I don't know. This is weird. This is weird to be like, there are 2 games left and they are both do or die games, and they're both against teams of, I don't know, similar talent and situation to where UCF is at?
Yeah, it's really weird because going into this season, we've talked about how that Black Friday game was supposed to be have actual stakes for the conference title, whether it was on UCF side, Utah's side, or even both. And then it is not. I even thought this West Virginia game would be a lot bigger than it is. And UCF didn't hold up their end of it, and West Virginia hasn't either. I thought West Virginia, after last year, they won, 8 games last year, right?
I think 9. I think they won
9 games? I thought they were going to be much better than they are this year. They're 5-5 and 4-3 in the conference. This is the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is the 9th team in the Big 12 against the 3rd to last team in the Big 12. I just didn't really see that coming. And other than the bowl stuff, all I really am looking at with this game is that game last year against West Virginia at home, where there was a ton of West Virginia fans in the stands, and UCF I think JRP threw 4 picks and they lost. That hurt a lot just because I was annoyed the whole time because of how many West Virginia fans were there. And so I would just like to not lose to them again.
Their fans are pretty obnoxious too. They're quiet now.
Yeah.
Obnoxious in a good way. I don't hate them. I think they're rabid football fans. They just let you know that their team is better than yours. But yeah, that was actually maybe the least enjoyable Big 12 game start to finish from last year. Because obviously we talk about, why are you looking at me weird?
Kansas, I think, was probably worse, right?
All right, Kansas.
Because they were at least in the West Virginia game for a while. But
I'm going to rescind that take. I was flat wrong. But I don't know. I think the Kansas one was just weird. It was on the road. JRP comes out and moves once and it's can't be out here, guys. Can't be out here. And they immediately take him out. And it was a whole mess. It was just, I don't know. There was just something about, that was UCF's first home loss by double digits in 8 years. And we didn't know at the time that was going to become commonplace. But it just was that combined with so many West Virginia fans in the crowd. And it was all the turnovers. I just did not enjoy that game at all.
Combined with Shaq in his DJ set before the game declaring that was going to be the day that West Virginia died. And then West Virginia came out and really beat UCF pretty badly. It was a recipe for just everything's being horrible and sad. So, I would like for UCF to win this game. It is kind of weird because West Virginia is in that spot where a lot of them, I've seen a lot of them on Twitter talking about they want Neil Brown fired. So it's both of these fan bases are coming into this game wouldn't it be better if we lost? But I don't know. Neil Brown, I don't think
they took an off-season break from wanting him fired. They all wanted him fired going into the last season. Then they still wanted him fired early in the season. Then they started winning. They finished 9-4, 6-3 in the Big 12, and they're actually, we love Neil Brown. We've never doubted him. Then this year, the things magically aren't better, and they're actually, no, we hate him. It's just that's maybe a little window of what UCF's in for if Gus sticks around.
Yeah. So they have. It's been weird for them. They're 2-4 at home this year.
Their last home win was 2 months ago.
Yeah, they're 3-1 on the road. They're 2-4 at home, and they've had a pretty tough Big 12 schedule. They've lost to Iowa State and Kansas State, who were both ranked at the time. Early in the season, I think it was the season opener, they lost to Penn State. But lately, they beat Arizona, who, as UCF saw, was not good. They did beat Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, and then last week they lost by 14 to Baylor, who all of a sudden Baylor has an actual pulse and is decent. They've looked better as the season's gone on. But yeah, this is a team I don't really know what to make of them. Their quarterback Garrett Green, who just destroyed UCF last year. He's back from an injury. He missed those last 2 wins. He missed, and not having a great season. He's thrown for around 1,600 yards, 11 touchdowns, 9 picks, only completing a little over 50% of his passes. He's just a really good run threat. He's run for 600 yards and 5 touchdowns on 98 carries. I've seen some fans who want the backup, Nico Martial, to start. I don't know if I said that right. He started the 2 wins against, Arizona and Cincinnati. He started those 2 games. Wasn't that great, but they won those games and then lost as soon as Garrett Green came back. So people are kind of maybe done with Garrett Green, but
I'm sure that had nothing to do with Arizona and Cincinnati being 2 of the worst, not as good teams in the league.
His stat line was not that good. It was not that impressive. It's just they won those games. But it's senior day. Garrett Green is a senior. It'll be Garrett Green.
It needs to be studied, and perhaps it has been, fans' obsession with quarterbacks. I feel like the average fan sometimes does not understand that there are other players on the field. I don't know. And we're all victims of that to an extent. I think we've done on this podcast, but it's always just very funny to me. It's situations like that where the quarterback actively did not play well, but they just won the games. And it's he's the guy. It's or just other things happened on the field outside of that single player. But I don't know. Anyway, Dylan Risto, superstar.
That's why our numbers go up every time we do a quarterback-only podcast.
We're never going to I don't know, maybe we should drop the ranking of our most listened to episodes all time. It is literally just every episode where a big quarterback thing happened. Land KJ Jefferson, land John Rice Plumlee, Mikey Keene starting, John Rice Plumlee hurt. It's that's all you guys care about. And we're here to provide it.
Yeah.
The thing about West Virginia is, and I acknowledge this as I'm about to say a thing about how their wins have come against all of the bad teams of the Big 12. I recognize UCF is one of those teams as well, but I mean, really, it's you look at the teams they beat. It's Kansas they barely beat. Oklahoma State they beat up on. That looked way more impressive at the time before Oklahoma State was 0-7 in the Big 12. They beat Arizona in a close one. They beat Cincinnati in a close one. And it's when they've played the upper tier of the conference, like Iowa State and Kansas State, they haven't been competitive. And the thing you can say about UCF, and it's part of what's made the season so maddening, is they've been competitive. They went on the road to Iowa State and almost won. They went on the road to Arizona State, who now might go to the playoff and almost won. It's that UCF has showed that's part of why the season's been so infuriating. Is it's not like UCF has been out there and we're just sitting here saying, yeah, they just don't have good players and they're getting beat up on and there's nothing they can do. It's no, they've improved as the season's gone along and they've done a better job about getting guys into the right spots. They've been competitive. West Virginia really hasn't whenever they're playing a team with a pulse. So I don't know.
Yeah, and this is a team that it's kind of weird when you look at the way they match up. It's it's almost a similarly run team to UCF because they love to run the ball. They don't have that great of a passing game, but they have two running backs who they kind of have almost evenly split carries between. Jaheim White has 116 carries, 639 yards, and 5 touchdowns. CJ Donaldson has 3 fewer carries, 113 for 525 yards and 7 touchdowns. So they will try to run the ball. They're top 30 in rushing. But like I said, Garrett Green is thrown 9 picks to 11 touchdowns. And when you have those two running backs and Green has the ability to run himself, it feels almost like UCF before Dylan Risk was in. It was a good backfield and a running quarterback. That's kind of how they operate.
It's a small sample size, but we have 2 games since Addison Williams took over the defense. And in that time, Arizona, 5 rushing yards on 25 attempts, which is still so funny. And even Arizona State, 99 rushing yards on 32 attempts, 3.1 yard average. They didn't have Scattaboo. Probably looks different if they have him. But I don't know. It's UCF hasn't been atrocious at stopping the run these last few games, or really this season. It hasn't been a nightmare like it was last year. Yeah. So I don't see that, and I'm not shaking when I'm seeing that, especially because I do think Garrett Green's the type of quarterback where UCF can focus a little more on the run and they'll be okay. We know he can hurt UCF. He hurt them last year, but he's not some superstar where, oh God, if you don't account for him, things are going to go off the rails.
Yeah. I think this ends up being a very close game. Just these two teams seem like they're at very similar levels and they do similar things. I just don't. What's actually very interesting is I was looking at just some of their rankings across the board, and probably one of the better things you could say about West Virginia is they're extremely disciplined. They're averaging 31.7 penalty yards per game, which is 4th best in the country. So there's one thing, I guess, but their defense is not good. Their defense is allowing 30 points per game. They've only forced 9 turnovers in 10 games. They are 126th in third down defense. So this isn't a great defense. And I think this game, and it's funny, I was about to say this game being on the road at West Virginia is what probably makes it the toughest, but they are 2-4 at home this year. They just aren't what I thought they were going to be this year. And the more I looked into the way their season has gone, because I've seen a few of their games here and there, but not a ton. The more I kind of looked into them, it was I kind of almost feel like UCF might win this game, and then I think they might beat Utah, which how hilarious would that be to be back where we were last year? They finished out 6-6 and got there in an insane way.
Yeah. Roadmap's there, and that did not feel remotely possible before Risk took over. But what?
Dylan Risk stepping in to save the season.
It's true. After I just attacked everyone for thinking a quarterback makes the difference. Hey, they're averaging.
Probably more so save the season is Gus giving up play calling and then firing Ted Roof.
Teeny tiny sample size. UCF averaging 43.5 points per game since Dylan Risk took over as quarterback. Obviously, the Space game helping that one. But the other thing about you talk about them, being terrible at home, which can relate with how the season's gone for UCF. But the other thing is, it's the fans have turned on that staff. Everyone just wants him gone. It's going to be freezing cold by Florida standards. I think the high's in the low 40s. I'm not expecting a hostile. There might end up being about as many West Virginia fans as there were in Orlando last year, as there are going to be at this game. So I don't think this is going to be some fierce home atmosphere. I also don't. Maybe this is Florida ignorance. I know that fan bases in colder states like to be like, oh, they're not going to be able to handle the cold. I don't think UCF is going to crumble because it's, in the 30s. I could be wrong.
It is going to be weird. Like the weather is going to be very weird. Like it looks like it could be rainy and it's going to be like 45 degrees and windy. So
I just see rainy, 45 degrees and windy, and I see RJ Harvey getting 30 carries and killing them. Like that's just like how my brain processes that information. I don't know.
Yeah. I see that and I'm like, oh, I wish it was that here.
I know. We had it last Friday for no damn reason. It was beautifully cold outside. It was like frigid almost. And I don't know where that went and why we can't have it back. But
it's supposed to come back this week. I don't know why we're talking weather now. It was, guys talking weather, but we're getting a cold front like tomorrow or Thursday. At least we are in
tomorrow.
Tampa, but ooh, yeah, I think this is great. This is great podcasting. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to rain, at least in Tampa tomorrow. It's supposed to rain. And then Thursday, the high is 67, low is 55 here. So
I want to keep talking about this, but I'm trying to be aware of the fact that we're just doing a weather report on the podcast. Yes,
I know, but it's great. I think
it's coming down. Yeah, it's going to be the highs in the 60s starting Thursday, and it's going to be that way through Sunday. We're going to have a lovely, chilly weekend.
I can't wait.
I got to do something Christmassy. I'm a big like do Christmassy things while it's cold.
Break out the UCF hoodies early. I'm going to do it just because I can on Saturday.
Can I derail the podcast in a very specific way?
I think we already did.
So sorry guys, just skip ahead like 2 minutes if you want us to preview the West Virginia game. This is podcast specific though. I have been decorating my apartment with Christmas decorations, and I have 2 nutcrackers, and they're like large, and you can like mess with them, like because it's like the thing in the back where they talk. And my dad is adamant that you and I need to do a podcast where we talk with the nutcrackers as a Christmas themed episode. And I thought he was joking at first. He's not. My dad is adamant that we do that. So I just wanted to say to listeners, if you'd like an episode where instead of us, it's 2 nutcrackers, just let us know. And I'd be willing to do that for the joke.
I'd have to go get one, or we'd have to do like one of our live podcasts.
My dad thought it through. Thought it through. He said when the Utah post game, which I can't think of anything funnier than like UCF has just lost and is not going to a bowl. There's a nutcracker just being like, yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, when I get there on Black Friday, I'm gonna have to see these nutcrackers and see what he's talking about, because it would be a very funny visual.
They're pretty big. Like they would fit very well on the screen. Yeah.
Would they? Yeah, they'd probably fit better on the screen than you and I do, sitting shoulder to shoulder right after our post game podcast.
They're pretty easy to maneuver. I tried talking with one; it worked. So so food for thought. Just something to think about.
It's great. I love it. We're gonna have people mad that you brought up Christmas decorations in November. I'm a big Christmas decorations early guy too, so
it's November 19th.
You guys can shut up. Really,
I'm getting my tree on like Friday. What are you talking about? It's literally
my tree's been up for a week and 2 days now.
Yeah,
and my UCF tree's been up even longer than that. So yeah, got to do it early. Got to have some joy in this middle of this 4-6 football season. Anyway, let's get back to the. I don't know. There's not much else that I really have to say on this matchup other than here's my notes as far as the general thoughts I have about this game. 2 good run teams, 2 bad defenses, 2 bad head coaches, 2 very mid teams. That's literally what I wrote down under my thoughts section in my notes. These are not great teams, and I think that might make for a good game. Yeah,
I think this could be a fun game. But you know what? UCF's played multiple fun games this year that have made me want to pull hair out of my head and scream to the moon. So like, it's like, it's fun if you're casual. It's not so fun for me, but I think they're going to win. And that's annoying in some ways. And I want to be clear that I'm not in the camp, because I've seen and I think this is overblown. I think the vast majority of fans do not feel this way. I think 1 or 2 tweets of fans with 3 followers saying that they want UCF to lose so Gus gets fired or something, and people have blown it up to make that sound like that's a significant chunk of the fan base. It's not. And I have to say, I've thought about the concept just from an educational perspective of if I knew that it would result in a coaching change, would I want UCF to lose? I'm not built that way. I'm genetically not built to ever want UCF to lose a game. And I'm going with all this season has been, if they lose to West Virginia, I'm still going to be devastated that the bowl streak is ending, that for the first time since 2015, they're not going to a bowl. There was a time fairly recently where I thought to myself, I literally remember having the thought of what would ever have to happen for UCF to not make a bowl again. I just don't see it happening. What would have to occur for them to not at least be 6-6? And turns out it takes a lot, but we're here possibly. And that's going to suck. And I don't know. Yeah, maybe you can argue it helps a coaching change. I don't even know if it does, to be honest with you, but I just know I could never, ever root for that under any circumstances.
I think the best that you could get out of me in that situation is just, well, I can't really do it because we have a podcast, but not watching the game. I can't watch a UCF game and actively root for things to go poorly.
And I've done it with the Magic. I've done it with the Magic back when the NBA had a very stupid draft lottery where you had to be really bad to get good. I mean, I literally remember watching a Nets game towards the end of, I think it was like the 2014 season, and Nets make a big shot, and I'm like, let's go, because I'm trying to get that number one pick. That's dumb, and it's not what we're doing here.
I remember, I think it was 2014, watching the Bucks actively tank in Week 17 of the season. I was at the game. They were up on the Saints at halftime, and they pulled all their starters, and then they lost. They blew the lead, lost. Fell to 2-14, 0-8 at home, and got the number one overall pick. And
American sports are very stupid. In some
watching
ways.
that game, I'm just like, I didn't know how to feel. I was like, yeah, I'd probably rather them get the number one pick, but I think I'd rather them lose organically than like watch them pull all their starters with a lead. Like once they had a lead, I was like,
yeah,
that'd be kind of cool if they won.
That's dumb, and that's why I think UCF's going to win. I don't know though. They've. I can think they're going to win, and then they have risk throw from his own end zone or something. Like it's like things happen, but
yeah,
I don't know. It's going to be a rough pod. It's going to be a rough post game pod if they do manage to not win, because I've realized I think I've really insulated myself mentally. Like I said the words on this podcast. I think after the BYU game, there's no way they're going to a bowl this year, and I think even as I was saying that, I wasn't really believing it. And now that we're here and it's like might be decided, I'm not emotionally prepared to just not have a UCF bowl game to look forward to all December. It's a foreign concept to me. It's a very foreign concept. I'm
going to do another Tampa sports reference. I second in like a minute, but you are aware of this because our friend Zach, he would come to you with like needing help this whole summer when I wouldn't give up on the Rays. And there were times where I told him like, yeah, like I'm done. Like they're not making the playoffs. But, like even when I told him that, I'm like, I still kind of believe they could. And that's how it is now. It's like, I don't know. I think there was a moment where I was like, there's no way they're going to get to 6 wins. And right now we're sitting here and I'm like, I think they might actually do it, which is crazy. And yeah, it's unfortunate because like there was a time where the BYU game sucked. But at the end of it, I was like, I don't really feel anything because I didn't expect anything differently. Now that I'm going in these last 2 games, I'm like, I think they could do it, and I might expect them to win.
Yeah.
It's going to be way worse when they don't.
It's hilarious that they very much could finish with a winning record this season. That's hilarious for what the season has been.
That's it. Would the funniest outcome from here be winning the next 3 games? Like winning 2, getting to a bowl, winning the bowl game?
The funniest outcome from here is Gus at some point taking back play calling between now and the end.
No, that's not funny. That's just
that would objectively be very funny if we got another presser of him being like, I gotta get funny. Okay, I have the funniest outcome. KJ somehow plays.
He starts the bowl game.
Like, I don't know what would have to happen. Like by the bowl game, like Jakari and Risk and EJ have all transferred out because of the way this was handled, and they're just left with KJ.
That would be funny. And he just balls out. Like he just throws for 300 yards. That'd be great.
Could you imagine? What would we even do with that? I feel like we would be like, we're not doing a post game podcast because we don't know what to say. Like we can't deal with that.
Yeah, and so we can get to just our score predictions here in a second. But one thing I actually meant to bring it up earlier. It's weird how we are kind of in the same. Like this has been the same season as last year.
Yes.
And last year there were a lot of close games where they were like objectively fun games that they ended up on the losing end of that made it very frustrating because that Oklahoma game they could have won. Like there were multiple games last year that they lost that they could have won. It's been the same way this year. And it's just, I know it doesn't work that way, but like flip those results and you're like, wow, UCF's killing it right now in the Big 12. It's like that's been the more frustrating part is because it's not like they're just not at all ready. Because if they were losing by 30 every week, I'd be like, wow, yeah, they just weren't. They weren't prepared for this move up. Like I think they're more or less prepared for it and handling it decently well, but it's just they're on the wrong end of every close game. It feels like. And
think of how remarkably different this season is if you just flip Iowa State and Arizona State. Which they both almost won. Arizona State, they had the ball and the lead in their in Arizona State territory, and they had a 4th and 2, which they'd been picking up all night. And we're like, what if we made this Wildcat and told Arizona State, attention, that guy, he's going to get the ball and go there. So just a heads up, great decision. But listen, the Big 12 is going to be like that. I mean, that's the thing about this is you are what your record is, and this isn't going to be a conference like in the AAC where okay, so UCF's really good and this team's really bad. It's just going to be what you do with the games, and some are going to go your way and some aren't. The issue for UCF is these last 2 years, they're 3-6 in single score games. And most teams, you take a sample size of a couple seasons, they're about 500 in single score games because that's just kind of the way those go. For UCF to be 3-6, that's the difference. That's what's happened is they haven't been able to win the close ones.
Yeah, which makes my score prediction scary.
Me too.
I wrote down the words blind faith score prediction. UCF 34, West Virginia 28.
I have 35-27 UCF.
All right. 35. So you have an 8-point win. I have a 6-point win.
Really impressive at Arizona State outside of the one throw that, don't ask your quarterback to do that. I thought he showed a lot of composure. He's just he manages the offense well. He gets the ball to good players and he opens things up for RJ and for the skill talent around him. So he has my trust at this point. I think the offense is going to function. I think they're playing a bad defense. The defense is the bigger question mark to me, but again, like I'm not afraid of Garrett Green. So I think it's gonna be close. I just think the UCF's going to end up on top.
Yeah, I think so, which is why I even during the bye week, I think and maybe it was them West Virginia going and losing by 14 to Baylor, and I guess it was me diving in more to West Virginia, but I was looking at this and I was like, yeah, I think they could beat BYU, or I think they could beat Utah. I said BYU. Yeah. They could beat Utah on Black Friday, but I don't think that they're going to win at West Virginia. Now I'm looking at this game and I'm like, I think they might do it. And then I don't know, I might dive more into Utah in next week and think, oh, well, no, never mind. They're not going to beat Utah at home, but we'll get to that.
I will say exact same boat as you. West Virginia was a game that I had written off probably a couple weeks ago, and it was this preview where I'm like, oh, you know what? No, they're bad. So
they're the same team as UCF. It's like this
is going to make it all the more devastating when you're hearing from us on Saturday and we're getting on, and Bailey is like, well, welcome to Pegasus Podcast. Christian, UCF lost 48-13. How are we feeling?
I would be stunned, which is crazy to say, but if they went out there and got blown out by this team, it would. I'm not anticipating that. Yeah. Even more alarm bells than there already are. I don't know if there any more exist.
You're going to get the notification that Gus is retired 4 hours later. Yeah. If that is the final score of that game.
Yeah. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll be back on Saturday with the post game. But before that, we'll go a little bit of football news. There's not a ton. Actually, I forgot a piece, and I don't fully know it, so I'm going to do my best to roll through it. RJ Harvey was named a Doak Walker Award semifinalist, which, well-deserved, and I hope he wins the award. I don't know. I have a hard time, just feeling like maybe it's a UCF against the world kind of thing, but, I just have a feeling he's not going to get the consideration he deserves for it. It's probably going to go to Ashton Genty, right? I don't know. I would think
it's absolutely going to Ashton Genty. Harvey will obviously be a finalist. I don't know if they release vote totals and things like that, but I think he's absolutely going to be all Big 12 first team, which is really all I wanted after he was completely snubbed from Big 12 honors last year, which was just egregious.
That was something I thought about a week ago. And I was thinking he's going to be that guy. And it does feel good after he was snubbed last year completely.
Because that was a classic fan moment where all the UCF fans were livid and all the Big 12 fans were like, shut up. What are you talking about? Now it's like, well, would you look at what happened? Turns out he was incredible the whole time. And how's Ollie Gordon doing? How's he doing? It's November and he hasn't won a Big 12 game. But anyway.
The other thing, I mentioned it on the podcast last week. I don't remember how I phrased it, but I think I might have said that BJ Adams and RJ Harvey had received invites to the Senior Bowl. And then obviously it came out this past week that they both accepted invites to the Senior Bowl. And then the other one that I didn't write down, Penny Boone was invited. Was it the Hula Bowl?
Yep.
He accepted an invite to the Hula Bowl. And that was my moment where I was like, okay, so he is still around and they're just not using him. And I don't know. I don't understand any of it, and I never will.
Did you catch the press conference this week?
No, I did not.
Yeah. Sorry, I got lost in thought because I was trying to find the direct quote so I could pull it up, but now I can't find it. I believe Gus was asked about Penny Boone and confirmed that he's healthy. Was asked where he is. It was just yeah, he's there.
God. I honestly, and I don't know, whatever, it was his choice, but I feel bad for him because this is not how this season was supposed to go for him. And he had a very good year last year, and very clearly, the tape from that and just, I guess, the name value from that was enough to get him this invite. But this was just the decision to come here has been horrible. I know, there was circumstances where it was one of his last options, right?
Yeah. Gus was asked and said Penny is healthy and available to play. I just keep telling myself there has to be something behind the scenes because it just doesn't make sense. And it's not even like he got out there and sucked. He was good every time he got out there. They would do this. It's honestly just goes back to, we talked about the one issue was even back to Gus's time at Auburn, he was never big on multiple running backs. It was always you have a guy and that's your guy. It was never when UCF could balance, which maybe we didn't give Heupel enough credit, that he had Otis and McCray and Killins and balanced them all well. And they were all different kinds of weapons and they were used that way. I know Otis wasn't always used perfectly, but you do what you can. And it just felt like they didn't even know how to integrate Penny this year. Like it would be like a bunch of RJ, and then randomly you get one drive that's just Penny, and then it's back to RJ. Like you remember that he'd randomly get like 3, 4, 5 plays in a row, and then you don't see him the rest of the game. And it's like, could they just physically not figure out how to use multiple running backs of different skills? Because even Miles, I think it's been easier for them to integrate Miles because he's just a Harvey clone. So they just do the same thing they put him in. Could they really just not figure out how to use like a physical bruising running back? Because that's dumb.
And it's crazy to me. I mean, especially when you think about the fact that they couldn't pick up that 4th and 2 at Arizona State, and they've got a big bruising running back like Penny Boone. But also, like with all of that said, if they couldn't figure out how to do it, like they recruited him here, like they brought him in. It wasn't just so that if RJ gets hurt, we have another guy who ran for 1,400 yards last year. I don't even know if that would have been the case. They would have just put in Miles, I think.
It's just another joke of this offseason. Like we're getting national headlines of UCF might have the best running back room in the country, and UCF was like, well. You'll never know since we're not going to play them. Like, they're just not going to get out there. And you'll see them a little tiny bit. And when you see them, they'll be really good. But that's all you get. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
I don't understand. Game of the week, UCF men's basketball. They're 3-0. They do play in 43 minutes as we're speaking. But the game of the week is Friday at 5 o'clock. They're playing Wisconsin, who is 5-0 in the first game of the Greenbrier Invitational. I think it is Greenbrier. That's a big game. I mean, that was I don't remember who put out the list. I think it was a CBS Sports list that put out like the 10 biggest college basketball games of the week, and UCF Wisconsin was on that game. Assuming UCF could take care of business in this game against Tennessee Tech, both of the teams are going to go into that game undefeated. And I know I think is the other game on Sunday of the Greenbrier. I think so. We play either LSU or Pitt, but if they have a good enough weekend, maybe you are talking about them getting ranked. That would be pretty.
Yeah,
that'd be
really
they're
getting votes, man. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, it's crazy in a good way. I'm excited about it. It's just it's been fun. They better win tonight.
Yeah, it'll be nice. Tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week this week is a uniform-based tweet. And if you're like, oh, why? The answer is because it's my podcast and I can do whatever the hell I want. So I tweeted earlier this week. I'm going to put up the combo right here. UCF wore this for, oh my God, the game's out of my head, Cincinnati this year.
Yep.
And I was annoyed at the time because fans were really angry about it because this was when you were all in your gold conspiracy phase. And this is a really good look, and we all liked it when they wore it against West Virginia last year, and this was a slightly tweaked version. They changed the sword stripe to have a white line through it instead of a black line, which is even more. And I was frustrated because everyone was mad about it. So I decided this week to tweet, this combo received entirely too much hate when it was worn. And all of you folks, since you're now calmer, and we've seen gold helmets 19 billion times since that game, we're like, yeah, you were right, Christian. Which was cool to hear because I'm pretty much right about everything. So, but then I got one reply, and listen, I'm not saying that you can't disagree with me because uniforms are opinion, but this reply bugged me. This was from Christian Jones at CJ Jones UCF. So I tweeted, yeah, I don't like my own name, so I don't like his name either. And so I tweeted, this combo received entirely too much hate when it was worn. He replied, probably because it looks like absolutely any team could be on the field in these. This is the most basic and boring combo out there. No idea why anyone would have any kind of love for them. So generic. So there's two thoughts. The first thought is you're objectively wrong. This is, I need you to not act like, maybe if you're like in the nosebleeds of a much larger stadium, you can be, white, black, white, that's it. Come on. The white face mask on the white helmet paired with chrome gold decals, that chrome gold sword stripe is so unique. It's such a strong helmet. White, black, white works. There's just something about the way the numbers play off the helmets and pants. Like this is a good combo. With the Polaris stars down the pants, the Pegasus on the sleeves, this is a good look. This is better than anything UCF wore from like 1979 to 2016. This combo beats all of those. So stop with that. The other thing is, if you listen to this podcast, you have to know that I care about uniforms more than anybody. And I just have to say to Christian, why are you bringing that level of energy to me at 10:06 p.m.? That is the angriest tweet I've ever gotten about a mundane. It's like I personally offended him by saying, "Hey, I think this combo is good." I don't know if you're like letting your frustration on the season leak into this, but come on, guys. They're uniforms, but they're not like kill me because I liked one. Let's tone it back a little bit. Rant over.
Yeah, cool. I like it. I don't think I realized at the time how much I liked the sword stripe and the way that looked. And
the white in the middle versus the black makes such a difference. Like it's such a minor little thing, and they did that for the light mode version of the helmet last year. But it's just it's little tiny tweaks like that like I only notice because I'm a freak. Like I know we don't want to talk about it because everyone was mad about that combo, and I was mad about it too. But for the Colorado game, they wore black helmets, black jerseys, white pants. They should not have worn that, but they had a white sword stripe on the helmet, and they changed the middle of the sword stripe to be chrome gold, which I hadn't seen them do before. And it's just like little tweaks like that. Just like that's why I get frustrated. And people are just like, uniforms suck. It's like use your eyes. Like I don't. It's like it's like the people who don't pay attention to them and don't notice any details, then say they don't have details. It's annoying, but whatever.
Fair enough. All right, cool. We'll be back on Saturday night with the post-game pod after UCF West Virginia. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you on Saturday.
Bye, everybody.